everybody, and welcome back to the Cinephile. This week is our first of 3 Wick Weeks, and we're going to be talking about John Wick from 2014. Jake, I know you saw this movie this week. What did you think of it? Because I definitely have some thoughts.
Yeah, so confession time. I had not seen any of the John Wick movies until Ben decided that he wanted to do a series on it for the podcast because we all know at the end of the month the fourth one is coming out. And so it's put it this way. I expected it to be a fight heavy movie with not a lot of depth, and it delivered on that. If you enjoy action movies, if you enjoy fights, like this is definitely a movie for you. And like the fights are very, very well done. I will say, like some of the best fights I've seen, like in cinema, and like everything felt new. Really, I mean,
Mhm.
nothing. It wasn't like the same old techniques that have been used for decades or many, tens of decades. That sounds stupid.
Tens of
Um,
decades, yes. That's
but you get what I'm saying.
yeah, no, I completely understand. And I think so. You said right before we started rolling, you said that this is a movie for the Chads. And I
Yeah.
texted Daniel this morning because I was watching it.
Your
Daniel, for those of
former
you who don't know, is
your former
former
roommate.
roommate and very good friend. And I texted him. I said, "This is John Wick. Like this is a Sigma redemption story." I said, if they were to write a book, it would say from Sigma to Simp and back, the John Wick story, because he goes from being just an all-out legend and just knifing through fools and shooting them down to having a wife, and then once the wife dies, goes back to just mowing down fools. And I thought I was pretty proud of that. But this definitely is. I will also say, as somebody that has seen all 3 movies, and it's been a while since I rewatched John Wick, the first one. This is the least entertaining of the 3.
Hmm.
So just for both you guys at home and Jake, like the next 2 movies get increasingly better, but there's just this charm about this movie that I can't really explain. And I've actually, this is the first week that I took notes. Jake was like last week, he's like, yeah, I take notes every week. It's like,
Got my
why do you
one
take
sheet of
notes?
paper.
Yeah, he's got his one
Don't
sheet. I've got
don't
my
try
one
and read the
sheet.
chicken scratch. I can hardly read it sometimes,
But
anyways.
no, I've got a couple of moments in this movie that are just like, I mean, it just shows John Wick is just king status. Um, but to kind of just jump into it, uh, Jake, I know you said that you're somebody that really likes story.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
I'm very much. I think movies exist to, um, yes, they exist to entertain, to fascinate, to help us escape. But I think ultimately what they're doing is telling a story, right?
mhm,
So that's something I always look for is what is our story here and how well is that story told? And if at you're looking at this movie from a story standpoint, I'm not going to say that it's a bad story. It's just a very simple story. Okay, it's
yeah,
it's
it's not
something that,
asking
yeah, there's no depth to it, if you will,
right.
and that's okay. Like I don't mean to like sound like some film bro over here. Like what does this mean? It doesn't mean anything. Like their movies, not every movie has to be a poetic epic, right? Not every movie has to win best picture. Like that's not the goal of every movie, and I would very much say that's not the goal, um, of this movie when they set out to make it. But
Mhm.
it's fun, it's entertaining. It's very much has kind of a guys feel movie. The there's really like
It's a Chad
no
movie. It's for Chads.
there's no romance or anything because like she's dead at the beginning of the
Right,
movie. Like we only
right.
see her as this like cell phone video. So and it's just it's
Where this
very
man John Wick trying to be sly and he ain't sly.
it's really the story. I think the best way to sum it up exists to get us from fight sequence to fight sequence, right?
Hmm.
And to help us understand why is John Wick fighting this person or why is this person trying to kill John Wick.
Yeah, and I think while the story is set up to do that, what's really interesting about the way John Wick approaches it, as to, I guess, other just pure actioners, is that one, there's a concept in film and even in literature called in media res, or in the middle of things. And this movie quite literally starts, well, I mean, technically it's in media res, but it's like low key at the end of the movie.
Really, it's like the end, and
It's
like,
literally the end of the movie. But that concept of we're kind of just thrown into it.
mhm.
But what they also do is the whole story is, in a way, in media res. We a lot of popular films today feel like they have to have origin stories, right? Like every new Batman has an origin story, and we see the same thing over again. Peter Parker. I mean, we saw both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield have the same backstory, because obviously Peter Parker is, the same in both those movies as a character. But this, it feels like the world is lived in, because there is no backstory really. You
It
learn
doesn't.
bits and pieces of it, but there's so many different lines about, like even when the cop comes to the door, it's like, and then Keanu Reeves go like, or he goes, hey John, he goes, hey Jimmy, and he's like, you working again? No, just trying to clear some things up. That
Yeah.
whole sequence, right? There's obviously a backstory to that, but we don't learn anything about it. I think that makes the world lived in a
Yeah.
little bit more, and it's unique in that differentiates it just a little bit from these pure action films that are just, the purpose of it is to watch guys beat each other up.
Yeah. I would almost say like that's one place where the story succeeds for me. Or I should say the telling of the story succeeds because um the filmmakers realize like no one's coming to see John Wick like this is not meant to be like a thinker, right? And so we don't need to get bogged down into the origins, into the details, into anything. I don't think I may be wrong here, but I don't think they set out to make four movies when they made John Wick. I think they probably are just like, let's make a badass action movie. And, they realized what that needed to be and what it didn't need to be. And it didn't need to be something with a lot of explanation. It reminds me of one of my favorite stories from the making of the original Star Wars from 1977. I've heard Mark Hamill tell this story on a number of different talk shows. And he tells the scene because for those of you who don't know, movies are rarely shot in sequence. So what that means is the first scene you see in the movie almost never is the first scene that's shot. They do things out of order that makes sense for scheduling and logistics, yada, yada,
Right.
yada. So they're shooting the original Star Wars and they have the scene in the trash compactor. And it's messy and grimy, and Luke gets dragged underwater by the trash monster and everything. Well, they're filming the scene, and the scene they're filming, this is Mark Hamill how he tells the story. They were filming the very next scene, right? When they get out of the trash compactor and they're running around the Death Star. And they're getting ready to roll. And Mark Hamill looks at Harrison Ford, is like, wait a minute, like I just got out of this trash compactor. Like, shouldn't I be like dirty and greasy and like my hair just be like wet and everything? And Harrison Ford just looked at him and said, hey, kid, this ain't that kind of movie. If they're worried about your hair, we're all in a lot of trouble. And it's
I
right.
remember that
Like,
story.
it never dawned on me. I've seen Star Wars hundreds of times, right?
Mhm.
I own them all, even though some of them really fall flat for me.
I agree.
Looking at you, Rise of Skywalker. But
That movie is, talk about a trash compactor.
anyways, but I that never dawned on me that like, wait, why is it Luke like still grimy? Because that's not the point there. You're not, if you notice it, you know, you're looking for that movie to be something that it isn't, right? And just like
Yeah.
in this movie, I think if you go into John Wick looking for a lot of depth and backstory and origins and all this, you're looking for it to do something that it's not.
And that's something that, even, I mean, going into this movie, because this kind of falls in line with what we've been talking about. This movie, and I wrote it down because it's, their marketing campaign is fascinating. So the first images debuted in August of 2014. The movie came out late October 2014. In September, there was a teaser poster, and mid-September is when the teaser trailer dropped. The final theatrical trailer dropped September 30th, a month before it came out. So, I mean, honestly, people weren't even going in expecting anything because they didn't know this movie existed.
Yeah.
Which is just fascinating. I mean, this really, and I think that also speaks to the way they handled the story, right? If going back to your Star Wars analogy, in 1977, nobody thought Star Wars would be good.
Right.
George Lucas didn't even think Star Wars was going to be good. He left the country. um, so I think that kind of the way they marketed this movie shows kind of how they feel about it.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it's not going to be a massive, like deep, complex story. Now, once we get into the next two films, we kind of get a little bit more of that.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at this purely as the first of the three, you really don't see a lot of that backstory.
Yeah. Which is fine. I mean, it is what it is in a lot of ways. And it's just a film that, like, if you enjoy this kind of thing, like, you're going to really enjoy, if you enjoy action movies, fights, all that stuff, really great stunts. I mean, this film, like, it is known for its stunts, right? Like, and it's exceptional for that. I mean, the director, Chad Stahelski, was Keanu Reeves' stunt double for The Matrix and some other movies.
Right.
The Replacements, one of my favorite football movies. Not a lot of people have seen. It's iconic. You should see it. But anyways, like, to me, when I learned that, I'm like, okay, this all makes sense. That they're like, we're going to do these fight sequences like to the highest level possible. And that's we are going to focus all our time. And it succeeds in that very well. Like I said at the beginning, it is new and fresh in how they do fights. It feels exciting. I'm drawn into the fights. It keeps me entertained. And so, like, I know you throw around the term gung fu when we were talking
gun
about
fu.
And it's like that, just taking a martial art and mixing it with like all these guns. Really hadn't seen that before, right? You either had the great hand-to-hand fighter, or you had the weapons expert in a lot of fights and a lot of action movies, I feel like. So I think combining the two, was one, a brilliant idea, and one that I think that really pays off in the movie.
Yeah, and that's something as well. Like, when we get into the other two films, they kind of up the ante. And I mean, you really see it because Keanu Reeves, and I'm sure we'll mention this again in the next couple of episodes, but Keanu Reeves is like an award-winning marksman. Like, he was a part of like an elite marksman squad. I don't know what you would call that, but he has trophies because of these movies, because he learned how to shoot so well. I mean, the attention to detail. And yes, and you mentioned this movie's directed by Chad Stahelski, but it's also directed by David Leitch, which he is not credited, but it's widely known in film circles that they both directed it. But just the fact that it was directed by a stuntman, that they focus so much on it, that you're right. I mean, it is fresh. We don't see, even with like the Taken movies, there's a little bit more story to them. Or Jason Bourne, I guess, would be maybe a good example in a way. But even that has more story.
That draws in more like international, like, covert spying intrigue into it, which is part of that story that we don't get here, and we don't need it here.
Yeah Kind of going into the movie, so I wrote a few things down on scenes that I thought were impactful or important, or just showed how much of a legend John Wick is. So one of the first things, I don't know if you noticed this, I noticed this on rewatch. So when the package with Daisy the dog is delivered, and John Wick signs for it, he keeps the pen.
Mm-hmm. She asked for the pen back,
and that was purposeful, because even though that's before we knew he was like an assassin, he always feels like he still has to have a weapon. And we learned later in the movie he killed 3 guys in a bar with a pencil, which, what an alpha. But just that kind of attention to detail, I mean, shows how much they care. I thought that was fascinating. Another thing I wrote down, he's an OG for feeding the dog cereal. Um, like again, like we talked about, like this movie is not it's not Shakespeare,
Yeah.
it's not Aaron Sorkin, but the fact that he's like, like we'll go and get you kibble later, so here's some cereal, like, and he poured milk too, like what a king,
I
what
mean,
an
hey,
absolute king.
if you've ever owned a dog before, how are you, you know, what else would you feed it? Feed it what you eat for breakfast.
Right, right. A couple more things that I kind of just noticed. One, Mayhem is in this movie.
I know. I was just honestly, this is the first movie that I've seen him in.
Yeah,
To be honest, I was just like, hey, wait a minute, that's the guy. Is this an
it's
Allstate
Mayhem.
commercial?
Yeah, yeah. And the problem is it's like Flo from Progressive. Like if I were to ever see her in a movie, I'd be like, that's Flo from Progressive
Yeah.
or Jake from State Farm. Like it's almost hard for you to be in movies because you are so linked to one service or ad or something like that.
Which I wonder, I almost feel like this probably predates him becoming Mayhem in the Allstate ads.
That might be true. I
You
mean, this
know,
movie is almost
20,
10 years old.
yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, like, um, before they went with the whole Mayhem campaign, which obviously has been very successful for Allstate, they've been doing it for a number of years, but like the whole, you're in good hands. Or I can't, I think that's
With the president from 24.
yeah, but
Yeah.
and it's like all about like the hand logo about being in good hands, and they're very like dramatic, and like the guy's got a very deep voice and everything, and it's got like, I don't know, it feels like very sappy, and so then they kind of, I think, got tired of that and took this Mayhem approach that's funny. So I wonder if, like, watching it now, you're like, that's Mayhem, but I wonder if you saw this in 2014, if when that came out, I'd have to go back and look if he had started the Allstate commercials yet.
That's a really good point. I mean, he may not have. Like I
Yeah.
said, this movie's almost 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, and you start to notice it, there are just little itty bitty, I don't want to say quirks, but like quirks or character traits or little itty bitty things that Keanu Reeves does or that the character of John Wick does, that because we don't understand what his job is.
Mm-mm.
Right? We only know him as a guy who lost his wife, has a cool car, and got this dog.
Yeah.
And then he starts speaking Russian,
Yeah.
right, to these two guys. And then also, I mean, it's literally, I timed it. It's a half an hour before the first kill of the movie.
Really?
They just do,
Wow.
yeah. They just do this build up, this kind of slow build up of learning about this character. And I think one of the things that makes John Wick an interesting action hero, or I guess maybe considered an anti-hero because he kills a bunch of people. But one of the interesting things about him is that there is so much buildup,
Yeah.
right? Oh, he's the boogeyman. You know, when
Baba
you go
Yaga.
to John, yeah, Baba Yaga, and then John Leguizamo's shop, and it goes like he knew that was John Wick's car.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and it's just this anticipation of there's so much intimidation and fear associated with this guy, which you're like, I mean, he's kind of, he seems like kind of like a sweet dog dad in a way, you know, that's grieving his wife, but then you hear like you
You get
with
so
John
many
Wick.
yeah, you get so many little things. What going along with that, one thing that stuck out to me, I had to look it up later, but when he's in the shower, he's taking a shower, and you see the tattoo on his back.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Latin phrase that I don't speak Latin, so I'm not gonna say it, but it translates roughly to "Fortune favors the brave." No, excuse me. Fortune favors the strong.
Okay.
And it's an old Roman phrase that they would use, the legionnaires would use, about honor and bravery and strength and everything. And it's a phrase that a lot of special forces units have adopted in modern times as kind of like their motto or their catchphrase.
Sure.
So even like the fact that he has that tattooed like on his back, like he's got some kind of backstory. Like either
Yeah,
he's ex special forces or like is badass enough to pull that off. And
yeah, and
you don't see Peter Griffin at the beach with Fortune favors the strong on his back. Like that doesn't happen because even clueless Peter Griffin would know that doesn't fly.
yeah, and that is another massive indication that there's
Mm-hmm.
something about this guy that we just haven't clued into yet.
Right.
Um, I mean, even one of the other things I noticed is some of the phrases, right? So John Wick calls in, he's like, I'm gonna need a dinner reservation for 12. Or something like, is the doctor in? Like these kind of like random things
Yeah.
that obviously are code words.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone's always like, hey, good to see you, John. He goes like, hey, Charlie, like, hey, Harry. And there's
Yeah.
just there's no forward progression in any sort of story
Yeah.
with these characters. He just knows them, happens to know them. And I think that all just adds to kind of the lore in a
Yeah.
way. There's that mystery behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to now move to ask if you have any fast facts for us, Jake.
I want to talk about the nightclub fight scene for a second. That exquisite as a fight
Oh,
scene. Like
hands
epic,
down,
epic. And like
hands down.
even just like all the different like yes, it's a nightclub, so like you're gonna have like different strobe lights and everything, but like just the different like moods of each floor and just like how he moves through them and like just the different ways he fights these guys. I thought it was pretty epic. But it's even more epic when you know that Keanu Reeves had the flu when they filmed that. He had 104-degree fever.
My lord.
And like that took a long time to film, like I think more than a day maybe. And like they would have to like force that man to like sit down and take a break in between shots. Like he was just like, no, I just want to keep going. And I'm like,
That was his flu game.
yeah, it really
That was his
was.
Michael Jordan flu game.
Yeah. Um,
That's
but
incredible.
yeah, it is.
That
And
which 104-degree fever, shouldn't you be like in a hospital?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was 100.
And he was
Maybe it was
just
102. He that man was sick.
he was sick, and this dude was just mowing down fools.
Yeah.
That
And it,
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
and like he did almost all his own stunts for this movie, which like is a
You'll
very
find that in the rest of them too.
which is a very Keanu Reeves kind of thing. I feel like, and also like his stuntman's the director, so he can't
Yeah,
be
isn't
like,
that kind of ironic
"Come
in
here,
a
do
way?
this for me."
like, like,
Yeah,
okay, you go and do the Matrix, and you have a stunt guy, and then the stunt guy is the director, so you can't use him. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to do all my own stunts.
yeah. I think
I think there's this inherent irony in there.
yeah. But even like that playing into the nightclub fight because like you can't say like oh like he did the easy stuff like no he did almost all of that himself while he
Right.
was very sick. I also want to know how many people got sick after that because like that's some like it's close quarters there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like
No
there was
kidding.
definitely a little disease transmission there probably.
That's that's super and I loved the visual of that nightclub.
Yeah.
Right? The mise en scène of that, the way it's shot, the cinematography of that as well is gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's dark and then it has these kind of accents of neon colors, which is very neo noir, which is what this movie is. And we may go into what that means next week. Um, but it's very neo noir and lots of shadows and kind of strobe lights, and one that helps break up the action, making it look crisper, even though obviously this was choreographed,
No
so
one died.
it is crisp. Right. No one actually died. Um, but no, some of the places are just gorgeous. His
Yeah.
house, where
Yeah. Legend. Yeah. I
like
want to know
I
what his day
mean,
job is. Like what because there's no way like he just got to be a stay-at-home dad like or husband, not dad. He doesn't have kids.
do you think she knew?
She had to have.
There's
She
that
had to have.
she had to have known, like, okay, I'm marrying this. I'm marrying the Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
There, she had to have known,
Yeah. But like
and she literally
he
was
gives
like,
that
okay,
up. He gives that up. So like what does he do now? Like I want him to be like an insurance broker.
and he buried it too.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing to just throw it in storage. He poured cement,
Mm-hmm.
concrete. I don't know, Adam Horke, if you're watching, I know there is a difference between cement and concrete, and I know you're very particular about that, but I can't remember the difference. So one of the two has been poured down
Yeah.
over this box. And so you see him dramatically with this great scene where he's taking the sledgehammer and slamming it down into the ground and then kind of revealing this box. And you've got a few guns and then a bunch of gold coins.
Yeah.
And the gold coins too. I mean, that adds to the lore as well. Like what at first you're like, okay, did he just
Pirates?
not cash them? You know,
Are they
does
pirates
my
here?
guy need to go to check into cash? Like, why do you just have gold? I mean, I know they say to take gold and bury it in your backyard, but one, you're in a basement, and two, just don't do that. I don't know. Like you're gonna forget where it
I
is.
would forget.
Yeah, but no, she totally knew.
Yeah.
Um, I also kind of going off like sorry, I'm reading my notes and the he answers the call in that hotel fight room scene.
Yeah.
Like they made an effort to have the phone ringing the whole time.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the scene, he goes and answers it. And they're like, it's a noise complaint.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that also adds to it's quirky in a
Yeah.
way. Kind of going into some box office information. So this was made on a $20 million budget. It was a low budget film. The next ones will be made for a little bit more. And its opening weekend was 14.4 million domestic.
It's pretty
So
good.
when we talk about box office numbers, I think we've mentioned this before. The rule of thumb is 1.5. So you multiply the budget by 1.5 to account for advertising. So that's what, 30 million. But also, if you think about it, they didn't really do much advertising,
Yeah.
right? Like
I
I
bet it
mentioned
would be
at the beginning.
I would imagine it would be, probably between 25 and 30, but probably trending more towards the 25, I would imagine.
Yeah. So I mean, it was 10 million shy of breaking even on its opening weekend, even though they basically didn't market it at all.
Yeah.
It ended up grossing 43 million domestic and worldwide finished with 86 million.
Wow.
So on a $20 million
Oh,
budget with so not much money, of course, this is going to get a sequel. And a
yeah.
lot of times I think when we think of sequels, we're thinking of Marvel, MCU, DC, these big tentpole films where that you have to hit the $700 million mark to make it considered successful and worthy of a sequel. But if a movie is cheap to make and it makes you money, why not do it again?
No.
Maybe add a little bit to it, build on the momentum from the first film, and they do that in the next two. But I just thought that was so interesting that this movie that John Wick is in the zeitgeist now.
Yeah.
People know you knew who John Wick was without having seen
Yeah.
this.
It's synonymous with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, it's argued that this brought his career back.
Yeah.
I mean, I low key think that's probably correct.
Probably.
If we're really thinking about it, I that's probably correct. But no, this film, uh, it had a lot of things stacked against it.
Yeah.
Right? No marketing. The star at the time, Keanu Reeves, wasn't as big of a star. He used to be like back when The Matrix was going on.
Yeah, I think of him like early 2000s, like, but like I can think of films then. The Matrix comes to mind, but
Mhm.
then the replacements like I talked about, and the bus one, Speed, with Sandra Bullock, which
Speed 2 Cruise Control.
is a quirky film, a decent film, but kind of quirky. Um,
Yeah.
but like I when I think of Keanu Reeves, I think of that. But then like I don't know if it's just I didn't pay attention to him, but or you know, you're probably correct that like he really wasn't getting that many jobs. But between that and John Wick, like I can't think of anything he did, right?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I know he did Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino.
Okay.
Hooah. That was my part of my Al Pacino. Never go against the family. Uh, but he also did Bill and Ted, obviously, which kind of
Okay.
made him a star in the first place. I have a hot take, and I mentioned this to you last night when we were talking on the phone. I have a hot take about Keanu Reeves as an actor. I don't think he's a good actor. I think
I
he's just Keanu Reeves.
I would say he is an average actor and above average action star.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
that's absolutely correct.
and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. Like he obviously like does very well, and like we've been saying the whole time, he's a legend. You know,
He is a
he's
legend.
he's iconic for this role, and like people will remember him, and like he's done like you know good action movies like this, but then like The Matrix is like a masterpiece by a lot of standards. You know, a lot of people
Right.
look at that and like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible, and like it is. And so like he has when he's put in the right situation and like the right expectations are asked of him, like I think he excels very well, but I don't know how versatile he is.
I will say that I'm still a little bothered by The Matrix because it beat out Phantom Menace for best visual effects. And I know that for a lot of people doesn't matter, but as somebody who's researched Star Wars a lot, what they did visually in Phantom Menace deserves a freaking Oscar. Now,
You
granted,
have
The
seen,
Matrix any other year, any other
yeah,
year, right? The Matrix definitely front runner, but I'm like the king of all kings, George Lucas. Well, actually, Jesus is the king of kings, but George Lucas, I mean, revolutionized digital effects again and didn't get the Oscar. I was like, give that man an Oscar. But that kind of bothered me, I guess.
anytime Star
Okay.
Wars doesn't win will bother you.
Uh I will confirm. I no, I will I won't confirm nor deny, but I did a Freudian slip and just said that's awesome.
Oh
Oh
goodness, oh
my.
Benjamin.
All right, now comes the time where we do our rosebud and thorn. If you have a rosebud and thorn for this movie, make sure to leave it down below. We'd love to hear from you. But Jake, did you have a rosebud or thorn?
Yes, I've got all three. We're going to start off with the rose, and I'm going to say the fights. Like I've been saying this whole time, the fights really is what I expected out of this movie, and it definitely delivered. They're fresh, they're interesting, they're new, they're exciting. They keep me interested, and they are epic, which is what I expect out of a Keanu Reeves action movie is epic fighting. So definitely Rose goes to the fights. My bud, I'm going to say dialogue slash story because like we've been talking about, you know, the story, it is what it is. Like
Right.
if you're looking for depth or development, like this isn't the movie for you. And then the dialogue, like it was just like there were a few lines that I was just like, okay, or like lines that I'm just like that were a little George Lucasy for me. They're a little cringe, or I'm like that sounded better on a page than it did coming out of
It
someone's
may have
mouth.
not even sounded better on the page. Because I
Yeah,
know what you're talking about. Because like half the movie are those lines, and
mm,
it's almost like they did it for the meme.
yeah,
Like it's low key just meme dialogue, and
kind of.
like like every time he goes, hey Dave, it's like, hey John, it's like, you working again? No. It's like,
Yeah, it's just like
like it's not.
it's it's
I don't
it's
know.
awkward.
Yeah.
It comes across. It has some awkward moments, so that's going to be my bud. And then my thorn, um, Willem Dafoe is in this, and I love Willem Dafoe. I think he's an incredible actor, and I felt
Mhm.
like his character of Marcus was just such a throwaway character that it disappointed me. Like that, like because we start off and like yes, you've talked about how like there wasn't a lot of marketing going into this, and it's a new property, so
Right.
people maybe didn't know what to expect, but like I would imagine like you came into this being like, oh, this is like an epic fighting movie.
Right.
So like obviously we know Keanu Reeves is our hero or our anti-hero, and so we have to have a villain that opposes him. And just like the way they introduce Willem Dafoe at the beginning, like with the umbrella at the funeral, and like the fact that he just shows up, it's like that had set up so much expectation for me. Like I thought in that moment, like, oh, he's the villain, and like this is gonna be some
Like
like
former accomplice turned
yeah, or it was gonna be
villain.
like some kind of like worthy adversary, like there's like respect among enemies, you know what I mean? That kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Um and but then like that obviously doesn't come to fruition, but like I don't know, most of his scenes I'm just like that's it. Like that's all you used him for. His death is kind of epic. Going out in the
Yeah.
blaze of glory. Like that's epic. But like for a lot of it, I was just kind of like, really? In a lot of ways, it it gave me a similar feeling to that of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, converting Willem Dafoe into Dumbledore, because in Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore is absent
Yes.
from a lot of that movie, and I kept being like, "You're supposed to be like the one that's like running this place and the one that's teaching Harry all these things. Like, why? How can you be absent?" And
Right. Obviously, there's a
for
purpose in that.
yes,
Yeah.
whereas I didn't feel like there was a purpose in this. I felt like it was a letdown of expectations.
I
Um,
know at I know at some point we are going to go over the Harry Potter movies,
we
and
have
just
to.
so the folks at home know, Jake hadn't seen all of the Harry Potter movies, and we watched them. And we were watching. I think we were watching the first. I have a video of you during Deathly Hollows.
Mm-hmm.
That we're not going to show here. That's going to be broken out for that specific movie. And I also have one where I think we were watching um Sorcerer's Stone, and you took one of the pillows on my you were sitting in a chair, you had a pillow on top of your head. And I took a picture of it, and it says that you were I said king of the rectangles. I don't know. I just remember that.
That's so
That was
random.
really funny.
We didn't
Um
we didn't watch Sorcerer's Stone together because I had already seen that one.
it must have been Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, this all came about, and we'll tell the story in more depth later. But I came over to your apartment, and you were gonna watch like one of the middle ones. I can't remember which.
Mm-hmm.
And you were just like, you've seen this, right? And I'm like, I saw the first one, but and then I've seen like parts of the other ones, and you just looked at me with this look of betrayal, and like, well, we're watching the second one then.
Yeah, no, I was gonna watch the third one. That's my favorite.
Yes,
Yeah,
I couldn't remember if it was the third or the fourth one,
yeah,
but
because I don't. You like the fourth one more than I do.
yes,
That's is the
conversation for a
fourth.
different time.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Get
we
back on
can't
track.
break into
This
that.
will be a 5 hour long podcast.
For me, my rose, I would say, is the action choreography. I also really like the mise en scène, specifically some of the set design. I really liked. Uh, so I completely agree with you on the fights. I think it was fresh, especially for 2014.
Yeah.
I don't have a thorn necessarily. And I think part of the reason why is this is the first film that we are doing in the second season of the Cinephile where this is a first of a trilogy. And then actually it's leading up to the fourth film. And I've seen the other two movies, so I know what is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the little quirks, I'd say, like I want more exposition, or I want more backstory on the Continental, or I want you know, those kind of things are addressed in the next movies. So it's hard for me to try to remove myself
Yeah.
from the knowledge of the last two. But I will say that some of the lore stuff I think is the bud. One of the gems of the next couple of movies is that it kind of dives into some more lore.
Yeah.
This kind of felt very um shallow
Mm-hmm.
in those depths. It felt really shallow in its lore and kind of world building
Mm-hmm.
in a way. I mean, obviously there was world building, and we mentioned that before because it was very unique, but it was shallow,
It's
and I
like
kind of wanted more
it
depth.
it introduces us to the world, and that we know like it's there, and there's this like hitman society thing that has rules. We don't really understand any of those rules except there's no you can't kill in the Continental apparently,
Yes,
or like execute contracts in the Continental. But really,
yeah.
other
There's
than
no
that,
business.
yeah,
Mhm.
other than that, like we don't know what these rules are. We don't know what I think they call it a code. We don't know the code. We don't
Right.
understand like how connected this world is, and how, or like if it is very intertwined with the real world, or if it's kind of separate. So
And the
I'm
funny thing is, we're gonna learn some of that in the coming
yeah,
weeks,
I was
which
say,
I'm
I'm
excited
looking
for you to
forward to
learn.
it. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to learning
yeah.
more.
So those are our rosebuds and thorn. Once again, if you have one, leave it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. We're now going to move on to what we typically do, which is we say what character we remind each other of. But considering this is all about essentially mass murder, um, we didn't want to do that.
Neither of
I,
us are mass murderers, we promise.
yeah, yeah,
Scout's
we
honor.
don't. Scout, I literally am an Eagle Scout. I do have rifle shooting merit badge, but I have what's called an essential tremor. So I would shake way too much to be able to pull off shooting a gun. So we've decided we're going to do our favorite kill for Wick Weeks instead of who we think the character
Yeah.
based on us would be. We're going to do our favorite kill. So Jake, what was your favorite kill in this first John Wick movie?
My favorite kill is towards the end when Keanu Reeves kills Dean Winter's character, because I found him annoying throughout the whole movie. And the fact that like in that whole end sequence when like they're trying to get to the helipad, he's kept being like, "Does anyone have a gun? Does anyone have a gun? Like, give me a gun." And I'm like, "You can shoot a gun out of everyone around you. Like, you're the one that should be shooting the gun, not this like mass murdering crime boss that is in the car behind you, just calmly being like, do, 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 like, oh, here's a gun. Here you go, have fun." And like fully set him up to like die and just be a distraction so he get away. But like when Keanu Reeves took him out, I was just like, finally, because he annoyed me for most of the movie.
I think for me, I have one and then an honorable mention. So my honorable mention is when Keanu Reeves snipes the Yosef's buddy who's playing Call of Duty,
Yeah.
because the edit on that is so crisp, and you just hear that, and you just see it go straight through.
Yeah.
That the editing alone makes that an honorable mention. I
And
think.
like the irony of that too. The
Yeah, I
irony.
know. It's like it's like when you first watch it, you don't exactly know what's going on, and you see it cut to just a POV shot of Call of Duty, and you're like, did they just run out of budget? So they just started filming Call of Duty.
Oh my.
Um, but I'd say my favorite kill was actually the last one that he does with, I believe it's Vigo,
Yeah.
the dad or the crime boss, because this man literally, they're fighting hand to hand combat. You got a knife, and John Wick, you see him make the decision to just accept the stab.
Yeah.
And then Vigo's like, all right, I'm golden. Like I just stabbed him. And so then he pulls it out and then stabs the guy in the neck. And then he goes, "I'll be seeing you, John." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll be seeing you." And but the fact that he did that was so
Yeah.
like, he was just like, he accepted
It was
the
unexpected.
stab.
It
Yeah.
was I I was surprised at that moment, and so I thought, that was original.
Yeah. I think, kind of wrapping up, this movie is so unique,
Mhm.
especially for 2014. Obviously, with the context we have now in the last 10, almost 10 years, it's kind of become more mainstream, the way they do action, the way they handle guns and things like that. But I mean, I really think that this film, this film is a catalyst
Mhm.
for what's to come. And I think that's evident, one, in that John Wick Chapter 2 and John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum are both, they just build and feed off of the first one.
Mhm.
So I would argue that this is a very important movie. This is probably my least favorite of the three.
Okay.
Um, but it is so, so important that I think it obviously is worth mentioning. And plus, when we do series on
Yeah.
this channel, we do all of them. Like if we were to do the Fast and Furious, which I've never seen any of them
Me
all
neither.
the way through. I mean, we'd be buckling up for 11 films. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's 11 weeks.
Might be a bit
That's like a
much.
fifth of our schedule.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think it's just a very, very important film. I know you mentioned Willem Dafoe. I just love Willem Dafoe.
So
So
good.
even though he wasn't used, I also love that he was kind of that guardian angel,
Yeah.
on the back of the shoulder, like he shot next to John Wick to let him know that Adrian Palecki's character was coming in the door.
Yeah.
Miss Perkins. I also really loved Lance Reddick. You know, may I make a suggestion, sir?
Yeah.
Uh, Bourbon. And I also like when he goes, "So, how's your laundry?" He goes, "Not even our laundry can fix that." I thought,
It was
I
epic.
mean, yeah, he's so great. I love him. He was in a film or in a show called Fringe that Daniel, who I mentioned earlier, and I watched when we lived together. And my dad used to watch that show, and that is one of my favorite, especially the first four seasons. Fifth season, it's a thing with J.J. Abrams. He doesn't know how to finish things that he starts. He actually has a whole TED talk on that. But the first four seasons are so good, and he's so good in it as Royals. Um, so those are like kind of some of my closing thoughts. Jake, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. As much as I've kind of ragged on it for the story, I did, enjoy it. Uh, it was a fun movie, especially if you like action. It very much satisfies that action sweet tooth, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's like we've been saying, it's fresh, it's new, and I would agree that it probably set about some change and brought a different expectation for fight sequences. Really, I think in Hollywood since 2014, and so I think it definitely, it deserves to be talked about. It deserves to be, if you enjoy action movies, I would definitely recommend it. Give it a watch. But like it does have its merit, and it does succeed in a lot of ways at some of its goals. So, yeah, I mean, not every movie is going to be perfect,
Right.
um, a lot of there, a lot of movies you like 70% of it, and then there's a little bit that you don't like, or you don't like a lot of it, and like that's okay, because we've entered into this era of movie making when there's so much content being put out. Like not everything is going to be it for everybody. I would say
Right.
even when Hollywood is only making a few films a year in comparison, like not everything was for everybody. So um people are
And
going to
that's
tell
kind of the
us,
point.
yeah, people are going to tell the stories they want to tell, and it's going to resonate with some people, and it's going to not resonate with other people. So just because it's not what you're looking for in a film doesn't mean it's a bad film. Maybe you don't like it, but I would argue that there are very, very few universally bad films.
I agree. I agree. It's all about the opinion of the person watching,
Yeah.
right? You're bringing your experiences to the table. You're looking at it through your glasses, if you will, your rose-colored glasses, maybe. Um, and so, yeah, it's movies are an experiential
Mm-hmm.
kind of idea, but they also uh, the beauty of the film fan community is that not everybody's going to like the same things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And once we kind of accept that, but I will say, I mean, this really was emotional whiplash. Uh,
Yes.
from the past month of episodes where we've been talking about romance to John Wick, which romance is quite literally absent.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, he loves his car, and he loved that dog, but that it definitely is some emotional whiplash. And so we've decided we're going to give you guys a week where we don't go heavy hitting into John Wick Chapter 2. We're actually going to be doing an Oscar special next week. So
Mhm.
the Oscars are coming up, and we've decided to give some of our picks. Jake and I have both seen many of the Oscar films, but we're going to talk a little bit about what the Oscars are, what the different categories are, and then our picks,
Yeah.
who we think are going to win. And so that's going to be an exciting change of pace.
Mhm.
And then we're going to get back into the next 2 weeks of Wick Weeks before we go and watch John Wick Chapter 4, which reminds me that one of the things we're going to be doing on the channel is reviews as well. Um, it's probably going to be me a lot because I go and see a lot more films in theaters than Jake does. That's not like a slight on
Yeah.
Jake. But like for instance, we've got, you'll see already on the channel, we've got a review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania that I did. They're quick little kind of things. But we're also going to be reviewing John Wick Chapter 4. Jake may join me for that one since we just did
Yeah.
all of them, and it'll be quick, bite-sized kind of stuff, not like a 45-minute episode like you're watching or listening to right now. But that's next week. We're really excited for that. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell to get all notifications on upcoming content. Once again, we've got reviews coming and we've got more podcast episodes. And Jake, do you have anything else to add before we go?
I mean, just we thank you all so much for watching. It's been fun to get back into this. And I'm glad to see that there are people out there that enjoy listening to two nerds talk about movies every week. So we thank you for
Yeah, I mean,
joining
we've
us.
got 5 in the can
I
now.
know.
This is
We are.
this is the 5th episode, and we even very very quick story. Jake and I went out to dinner with a couple of buddies, and we were at this restaurant, and the waitress, and she's probably watching. Shout out to you. Literally asked, "Do you guys have a podcast?" We're like, yes, actually, we do. But we're so thrilled to be able to do this and bring this to you every single week. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.